Welcome. I'm Bob Rubin. I'm co-chairman of the council, and I was told that my sole role here is to welcome you, which I've just done, to hear Ben as he talks about his new book, The Battle of Bretton Woods, John Maynard Keynes, Harry Dexter White, and the Making of a New World Order. Having said that, I'd like to make two observations. I've read this book, and it really, well, that's one observation. On the other hand, I got it for nothing, so, and it's worth more than that. Let me make two observations. Firstly, I think it's worth, and I know most of you know Ben, maybe all of you know Ben, but I think it's worth remembering why Ben is so well qualified to have taken on these complicated issues. He graduated summa cum laude from Wharton. He has a PhD from Oxford. He had a distinguished research fellowship at Oxford. And he publishes a journal of which he was the founding editor called International Finance, and it is really a scholar's journal for scholars. Alan Greenspan told me that when he writes very mathematical, econometric kinds of pieces, the places he published them in Ben's journal, he says there are only 4 people in all of America who will understand them, and they all read Ben's journal. Doesn't sound like a very profitable enterprise, but anyway. My second observation is this, and that having said that about the journal, the book is remarkably readable, and it is a fascinating, fascinating tale. It's a tale about the creation of the IMF and the World Bank. It's a tale about a particular moment in time. It's a tale about economic policy debates of enormous importance. And it's a tale about John Maynard Keynes and Harry Dexter White. And Ben paints vivid portraits of both of them. And at least for me, there was a great deal of information that was new and that I had not been aware of before. So let me just wind this up by saying that Ben got reviews, as you all probably know, the FT, the New York Times, that most authors would trade their souls for. That matter, maybe Ben did, I don't know, but just occurred to me this moment. But be that as it may, there are Faustian bargains that are worth making, but you can only tell in the long run. In any event, it's a terrific book. I strongly recommend it. Ben.
Thank you, Bob. Just to clarify, the New York Times review is not yet out, so I'm not quite sure what I'd be willing to trade for it. So thanks for the kind words, Bob. And indeed, anything you can do to keep up the press buzz about currency wars would be greatly appreciated. Indeed, the currency wars of the 1930s were a great obsession of FDR's Treasury. In fact, one of the driving motivations of the whole Bretton Woods conference was to eliminate currency wars, a specific type of currency wars, those directed against the United States and the U.S. dollar. In fact, Harry Dexter White, the U.S. Treasury representative, Morgenthau's right-hand man at Bretton Woods, briefed the American delegation before they went into battle against the British and others at Bretton Woods and told them, I quote, the fund, the new International Monetary Fund he was determined to set up, is designed for a special purpose. And that purpose is to prevent competitive depreciations of currencies, depreciations against the U.S. dollar. And in order to do that, they were going to create a system of fixed exchange rates, which would be sustained by this new International Monetary Fund. Now, it may seem rather strange in the current context when the United States is constantly badgering other countries, in particular China, to adopt flexible exchange rates and to stop pegging with the U.S. dollar. But the motivation was actually the same, to get a more competitive dollar. In the 1940s, all the pressure on the U.S. dollar was upward in the market, so countries linking to the U.S. dollar kept the dollar at a high level, whereas today most of the pressure from important emerging market countries, in particular China, most of the pressure on their currency is upward, so the United States prefers flexible exchange rates, again, in order to get a more competitive dollar, notwithstanding U.S. strong dollar policy, of course. So Bretton Woods was effectively a deal that the U.S. offered the world. We will provide you, as the world's sole remaining credible creditor, with short-term balance of payments, support in return for which you promise not to devalue against us without permission from the IMF, which we would effectively control. But FDR's Treasury, and Harry Dexter White in particular, had other goals at Bretton Woods that were far more interesting and far more controversial. In particular, to eliminate Great Britain as a political and economic rival in the post-war world. And that might seem remarkable now. This was our great democratic ally in the Second World War. But the US Treasury was really obsessed with making sure that we could exploit this unique moment in time to eliminate what we considered to be our last remaining rival in the world, which was Great Britain. From a quote from Henry Morgenthau speaking to President Truman after Franklin Roosevelt died. He wanted to explain what Bretton Woods was all about to him. Henry Morgenthau was FDR's Treasury Secretary. He said, "I intended, quote, to move the financial center of the world from London and Wall Street to the United States Treasury." And Wall Street is particularly interesting. This was part of a New Deal anti-banker agenda. It wasn't just international. This was really the New Deal writ large for a global stage. At Bretton Woods, Henry Morgenthau told the U.S. delegation, quote, "Now the advantage is ours here, and I personally think we should take it." To which Harry Dexter White added, "If the advantage was theirs, that is Britain's, they would take it." So the U.S. was absolutely determined to exploit this moment in time. So Bretton Woods was, in effect, a deal that Treasury struck with a severely weakened Britain to get it through the war and the immediate post-war landscape without financial collapse. U.S. would provide short-term financial assistance, in return for which Britain would first eliminate what was called imperial trade preference. This was privileged access for British goods to the markets of their colonies and dominions. That would be ended. Second, Britain would make the pound sterling again fully convertible into dollars. So this massive stock of useless sterling that the Britain's colonies and dominions had built up could be spent on something else besides U.S. goods. British goods, in particular American goods, and finally, and very controversially, to accept the US dollar as the basic unit of account for global trade. And as you can imagine, the British resisted this fiercely, and in fact, Harry Dexter White used some rather remarkable ruses at Bretton Woods in order to push this through. Keynes did not even see it until he had left Bretton Woods. It's a remarkable part of the story. But as Lionel Robbins, a famous British economist in his own right and a British delegate at Bretton Woods, put it, quote, "We needed the cash," unquote. Winston Churchill famously referred to American Lend-Lease aid as, quote unquote, "the most unsorted act." But the U.S. was, in fact, only willing to provide this aid after really milking Britain dry. We forced them, for example, to sell all their major subsidiaries of British companies in the United States. There's even some evidence that FDR's administration was willing to take bits of the empire, but not every bit. Here's a nice quote from Henry Morgenthau speaking to the U.S. Treasury representative in Washington in 1940. He said, "There is one thing I know I can say for Mr. Roosevelt, that we don't want any of those islands. I know he doesn't want Jamaica, I know he doesn't want Trinidad, and I know he doesn't want British Guyana." In fact, the U.S. was more spontaneously generous during the Second World War to China and the Soviet Union than it was to Britain. This seems rather remarkable today, but the mindset during the war was really focused on Britain as our main rival. Now, this was all overthrown 3 years later with the Marshall Plan in 1947, but that's another story to be told in my next book. But one of the reasons why the collapse of British imperial power in 1946 and 1947 in particular was as rapid and as violent as it was is because Britain was rapidly running out of dollars, and the U.S. Treasury was managing that process. If you look at the debates going on behind the scenes in the British government at the end of 1946, early 1947, when Burma, Greece, Palestine, India were all collapsing violently, it was all about dollars. We can't afford this anymore. We have to make the pound convertible in July of 1947. The only way we can possibly make that commitment is if we start holding on to our dollars. We have to let the empire go. And that was very much part of Harry Dexter White's agenda. Let me say a few words about the two main characters in the book, because they are indeed fascinating.